Greetings, my beautiful lovelies, it's Emmy and welcome back. Today I'm going to be attempting to make an absolutely stunning cake, and I have YouTube recommendations to thank for the inspiration. I was doing my usual late night YouTube watching and this popped up in my recommendations and I said, what is that? And it is an island cake. So the cake is absolutely stunning, and the recipe tutorial that I will be following comes from Kitchen Journal by Kalpana. I'll put the link down below, and it is pretty thorough, which gives me a pretty good feeling that this might be successful. That's always how I judge recipes or tutorials, is how thorough the recipe is written. I feel like the more thorough it is, the more descriptive, the better my chances of getting it right are. So as you can imagine, this recipe is pretty labor intensive and it involves gelatin. So you need some time to chill everything and have everything set up. So I've done some of this already, so let me walk you through the steps of what I've done so far. Because I knew this recipe was going to be intense, I went ahead and purchased a sheet cake from my supermarket. If you want to bake your own cakes, more power to you. So I bought a half sheet cake, and I used my 6-inch diameter springform pan as a guide to cut out 3 cakes. So based on my observations in the video, I figured out that the 3 layers should be a total of 3 inches tall. So go ahead and shave your cake layers accordingly so that you have that height. Okay, so once you have your cakes cut out, you're going to glue everything together with ganache. So ganache is simply chocolate mixed with cream in equal proportions. I used an entire bag of semi-sweet chocolate chips. So my chips weighed 342 grams, so I added 342 grams of heavy cream, which I heated up just to scalding, and then I pour that over my chocolate chips. Let that sit for a couple minutes and then stir it all together. It'll seem like it won't want to mix, but just be patient and stir it. If it still doesn't melt, take a whole lot and place it in the microwave and give it 30 seconds to warm everything up. And you want to make sure that that chocolate is fully melted and incorporated. It's going to look really runny. Don't be dismayed. You just have to cool it down, but the ganache will slowly thicken up, and you want it to be spreadable, kind of frosting-like texture. Now, if you let this chill completely, you can actually roll this into balls and make truffles. Ganache is super handy, it's beautiful, and it's delicious because it's just chocolate and cream. We're going to take a dollop and spread it onto our 7-inch pan. This is the base of my push-up pan. You can also use a springform pan. And then you place your first layer, then put a layer of ganache, put your next layer, and continue until all the layers are stuck together. Now I placed this in the refrigerator for a little added insurance to make sure that the ganache could set up and glue everything nice and tight. I've also discovered carving cakes is a lot easier when the cake is nice and cold. And now we're going to carve out bases of the mountain, and the bowls will represent the kind of underwater portion of the cake. So make sure you save all the cake scraps that you cut off, and then we're going to mix a little bit of ganache with that. The amount of ganache you're going to add depends on the consistency of your cake, but you're just going to knead it together until you get something that is moldable like Play-Doh. Then we're going to take this crumb dough and then we're going to shape the peaks of our mountains. Once we have our peaks in place, we're going to take our ganache and we're going to slather it all over the cake. You want to make sure you cover this entirely. So it's really important to seal in the entire cake because we're going to be adding gelatin in this, and we don't want the gelatin to seep into the cake. So the ganache acts like a bit of a barrier. I placed the cake back in the refrigerator, and then I went ahead and prepared my white chocolate. I melted a handful of these in the microwave, and then I added a couple cold ones in there. I think the key part of the white chocolate is that you don't want it to be too runny. If it's runny, it's going to drip. You want these kind of like wavy, swoopy marks on the cake. So you're going to place that on the bottom 2/3 of the cake. And then for the upper third, you're going to take some white food coloring, gently painted the top 1/3 of the mountains to kind of blend in with the white chocolate. You want these little brush marks. So have a pretty dry brush. So now it's time to make the jelly ocean. Now you're going to need a lot of gelatin. You're going to need 120 grams of gelatin. This works out to be like 16 envelopes of gelatin, and add 1.5 cups of water. You're going to mix this really well and let this sit for about 10 or 15 minutes to bloom. You want all of that gelatin to absorb as much water as possible. Then next in a saucepan, you're going to add 150 grams of sugar and then 600 milliliters of water. Bring this up to a boil, then add 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and then pour this over your bloomed gelatin. And mix this really well. You want your gelatin to be completely dissolved. So I went ahead and strained this to make sure I didn't have any gelatin lumps. I'm using Wilton's Teal, and I used a toothpick, and I did 4 toothpick dips of food coloring to the gelatin to get this beautiful turquoisey tropical waters blue. At this point, you're gonna have a layer of little bubbles and foam on top, and so I used a spoon to kind of scoop that off. We don't wanna pour this on our cake when it's too hot because it will melt the ganache. Get yourself some baking acetate that's 4 inches tall. Take some cooking spray, spray the acetate, and then remove the excess with a paper towel. Next, we're gonna assemble our pan. So if you have a springform pan, put the edges on, or if you have a push-up pan like mine, put your cake inside of the pan. Now we're going to seal the pan, and I just used packaging tape. You don't want any leaks, you don't want your gelatin pooling out. For some added insurance, use some plastic wrap, pull it taut, and then tape it all the way around. Now take your acetate strip with the oily side in, curl it up, and then gently place that inside of your pan. Tape it so it sits in place. Now we're gonna take our room temperature cool gelatin and pour it into the cake pan. This part is so satisfying and kind of nerve-wracking at the same time because now we're submerging our cake. So beautiful. This is a great way to teach your kids about island formation. Once you get your gelatin in there, you're gonna notice some bubbles. You want the tiny little fine bubbles. Those are perfect. The big ones, you can take a spoon and kind of scoop out. And then you're gonna refrigerate this overnight. Lovelies, this cake is turning out beautifully. We need to extricate the cake out of its prison. So that means removing all of the tape and saran wrap that we, wrap this in. Alrighty, let's try to get this cake out. Lovely, this is looking so beautiful. The water is transparent. I can see all of my waves and my texture underneath. So next we're going to remove the plastic acetate. This is so worth it. Oh my gosh. I am so happy. This is so beautiful. Look at that. Oh, it's coming off beautifully. It's so great, it's so great, it's so beautiful. It's so clear. So now that the cake is unmolded, we're almost finished. We're just gonna add some finishing touches to the mountains so they look a little kind of mossy and gorgeous. We're gonna use Maria biscuits. These are wonderful, I love these. We're gonna crush these up. You can also just use a plastic bag and a rolling pin if you like. But we want to get these really fine. So I wanna make sure I get all the big chunks out. So I'm gonna go ahead and sift this. We're gonna leave some plain, and the other two we're going to dye 2 shades of green. This is probably not the best method of storing your food colorings. Yeah, a couple drops of yellow in this one, or 1 drop, and 1 drop of green here. Okay, so I've got my ground up cookies dyed green and plain. But before we do that, we're gonna add a little bit of shadow and dimension, and we're gonna blend out some of this white food coloring. I'm gonna use a clean brush along with some black food coloring, and we're gonna just add some shadow here. This will give it some depth and make some of this white less stark. Just like you would paint a Bob Ross painting. I love Bob Ross, by the way. Back in the day when they used to show him on PBS. I used to watch it on the weekends with my dad. It's great. Remember Alexander? He was the precursor to Bob Ross. I heard that he actually taught Bob Ross all of his techniques. He was just full of life, but same techniques, same palette, same everything. Big man. He kind of reminded me of Penguin from Michael Keaton's Batman. Kind of shaped like that, but very nice guy, not a bad guy. Fire it in, and he would take the big brush and he'd push it really hard into the canvas, and he'd go, fire it in, fire it in. Oh, Alexander. He's probably passed. Oh. I'm going to save this glove for a minute. Oh, Oh my gosh, there's food coloring inside of my glove. That's hilarious. She puts on a glove so she doesn't get food coloring on her hands, and this happens. And I'm going to shield the entire thing because it's so clear and beautiful, and we don't want crumbs marring the surface. And then, of course, we're going to cover the surface here and sprinkle the cookie crumbs right directly onto our mountain peaks, just like that. Add some green, plain biscuits to give it a little bit of a shore. Okay, so now that we have our moss in place, now we can remove our plastic wrap. Nice. Alrighty, we're almost there. So for the final finishing touch, we're going to use some white food coloring, and we're going to add some wave patterns to our ocean right along the edge of the islands here. Blend it out. Alrighty, lovelies, the cake is finally finished, and I am so pleased with how this turned out. It was a ton of work, and I've got food coloring all over me, but all in all, this tutorial was great. Everything worked according to plan, and now I have an island cake that I'm going to eat. Alrighty, let's do this. Here. Boom. Oh, there we go, right through the jelly. Ding, 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 ta-da! Yes, it came out beautifully. Alrighty, I'm so pleased with how nicely that came out, that slice. Oh, very satisfying. Alrighty, itadakimasu. Nothing surprising there. We just got a basic chocolate cake with delicious chocolate ganache. Let's have a mountain with tons of food coloring. That cake dough mixture that we made, delicious. Lots of chocolate flavor and has a nice density to it, similar to a brownie. And then we coated it with more ganache, so it's extra chocolatey. That part was my favorite. Alrighty, the part that I'm most curious about, let's try the water. Very squidgy and slippery. I don't detect any of the lemon juice in terms of both flavor or acidity. Yeah, the jello part's probably my least favorite part. The texture's strange and it tastes like gelatin, which has a very strong flavor to me. So I think a little bit of flavoring would help that. So this recipe was very, very interesting. It was much more about the construction of the diorama, of the set, of the miniature world, rather than kind of creating the best tasting cake. I love the attention to detail, the clarity of the water, the transparency, being able to go under the water. It's just such a little fantasy, such a cute little tiny microcosm, and an edible one at that. All right, my beautiful lovelies, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I hope you guys learned something. Please share this video with your friends. It really helps me out. Follow me on social media. I love hearing from you. Like this video, subscribe if you're not subbed already, and I shall see you in the next one. Toodaloo, take care, bye.